Good evening, everybody. My teaching tonight is on Pinchas, and that is Numbers chapter 31, 25, Numbers chapter 25, 10 through 31. And then this week's Parashah picks up from last week's Parashah ending, when Balaam failed to curse the Israelite nation at behest of King Balak. He tried doing this 3 times, and he failed every time. After the third attempt of trying to curse the nation, but instead blessing them, Balaam then instructs Balak to use the Moab and Mennonite women to engage in sexual sin with the men of the nation of Israel. Balaam does this because he knows that sexual morality is a foundation of Jewish holiness, and God does not tolerate immorality. It is interesting to note that the only time when the Torah talks about God's anger as wrath, is when God is provoked by immorality. Balak does as Balaam said, and an orgy of immorality breaks out. Thus in turn brings God's wrath on the nation of Israel, and a plague takes 24,000 lives. And the Lord said, saying to Moses, Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, has averted my wrath from the sons of Israel, in that he was zealous with my jealousy among them. So I did not have to destroy the sons of Israel in my jealousy. So right off the bat here is where we see one of the anomalies in Torah. The name Pinchas, which is right here, has a small yod. And you can compare it to a yod that is right here. You can see that it is reduced in size. And the yod means a hand closed or closing upon to work or a deed done. I think it is fitting that the yod in Pinchas is made small here. In the context of Pinchas, the yod is Hashem's hand closing over him, and closing over Pinchas to work through him. When the yod is being made small here, Pinchas is humbling himself before Hashem, thinking selflessly and not selfishly in this zealous act. So according to the Talmud, the yod is the very letter of God. According to the Talmud, the yod is the very letter God used to make the world to come. The place that life in this world is supposed to be led, and that comes from Mykonos 29b. The yod is not made up of any other Hebrew letter, showing that the yod represents the sublime spiritual simplicity of the world to come. Adding a yod to a person's name, especially in biblical times, meant adding the element of olam haba, the world to come, to the reality of that person. It's like sap inside of a tree. It's already there, and though you can't see or use it, to access it, you must stick some kind of spigot into the side of a tree. That accesses the sap and then allows it to flow to the outside. The same thing is true of the world to come. It is already inside each one of us, because our souls are made up of the same material. Every soul is not just a package of divine light. It is a portion of the world to come. Inside each person, it's usually hidden and stays away and inaccessible. Until that is, a person sticks a spiritual spigot into oneself to access their soul. There is a few ways that this can be done, but they all amount to the same thing, the reality of the letter yod. That's why Pinchas did when he rose to the occasion and stopped the evil in its tracks, stopping the plague at the same time. God knows the motives of each person, of a person. People do not. The entire nation of Israel wanted to string up Pinchas for killing a prince of the Jewish people. He even thought that he had performed, even though he had performed the law as required. They still probably suspected he had acted for himself, as a lot of would-be zealots do, in the name of God, of course. Therefore, God brought the yod out of his name, a yod that exists in all of our names, if not grammatically, then certainly conceptually, out into the open for all to see. It is God's way of revealing to the angry public that he had driven Pinchas to the act that he did. It put all misgivings about Pinchas's act out of business. The significance of the yod being made small is also to show that Pinchas was not driven by murderous lust. He humbled himself before God and in turn stopped the plague that killed so many people because of God's jealousy. In this context, Rashi states that the word jealousy refers to a display of anger that results in anger. Rashi said that jealousy is a reaction when another is taking something that is rightfully his. God is jealous when the Jews serve idols because they transfer their allegiance from him to something else. And then Badminbar 21, I have the wrong one there. Nope, 25, 10 through 11. Therefore say, behold, I am giving him my covenant of peace. Now here's where we find one of the most unusual anomalies in the Torah. Normally, when a Torah is written, it's written by a specific set of people. And there's supposed to be no blemishes, no breaks in the letters, nothing. It's supposed to be perfect. Anything that makes a broken letter or anything out of sorts renders the entire Torah scroll, not just that portion, but the entire Torah scroll, incomplete. It's not kosher. So here, in this, we see Pinchas slaying the two, Zemiri, and I can't remember the lady's name off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but Zemiri was one of the princes of one of the tribes of Israel, and the woman was one of the princesses of the Moab people. And that's just very interesting in itself right there too, just because that's how bad the Moab people hated the Jews. That the leader, the king of Moab, would send their own daughters in to commit the sexual sin with the nation of Israel to bring them down. So right here is where we have the word shalom. And it's made up of a shin, a lamed, a vav, and a final mem. And the interesting thing about this, like I just said, is that in the letter vav, in every Torah scroll, it's broken. And we can see that a little bit better right here. There's a broken vav right there, and there's another picture of it right there. So the interesting thing about that is that symbolizes Pinchas' spirit going through the two people that were enticed at the entrance of the tent of meeting, in front of the entire congregation, of the sexual immorality that they were doing. He got so zealous that he physically stabbed that letter, and now because of that, that is by law supposed to be in every Torah scroll that's ever made. Under normal circumstances, any letter that is broken is incomplete and invalidate the entire Torah scroll, as I said. But here, like I just said, the law requires it. So I found some interesting things about some commentaries from rabbis about the broken vav. There is much speculation about the meaning of the broken vav, confirming the iniquity of this anomaly. The Talmud in Kedishun 66b cites Rabbi Nachman, who states that the vav in the word shalom is ketaha, which means broken. In this analogy on the Torah entitled Pinim of the Torah, Rabbi A.L. Shemimbam cites Rabbi Shlomo Yosef Zevin, who offers an insightful explanation of the broken letter. Rabbi Svin maintains that traditionally there are two forms of unity. One is mechanical unity, which is basically an external consolidation of different parts merged together. This unity creates an illusion of wholeness, but in fact, it is not truly whole. The true form of unity, however, is an organic, natural unity of various parts joined together by internal forces, which create the essence of harmony. Declares Rabbi Zevin, The unity of the Jewish people can never be mechanical or fabricated. It must be organic. Thus, the letter Vav cannot be broken. It has to be shalayim, unified in total harmony. This message is best translated by the shocking presence of the broken Vav in this text of Torah. Rabbi Yehuda Leib Yeager of Lublin cited the Ituri Torah, asserts that one who is zealous must be absolutely faithless in his motives. There cannot be a blemish or a break in his intentions or purpose. Again, a message best communicated by a broken Vav. Rabbi Bere Wen has an unusual and interesting insightful take on the broken Vav. Rabbi Wen suggests that the Vav is broken because peace is very fragile, almost always difficult to maintain, as it requires great effort to keep it together. All of human history bears out this fact. True peace, whether in the home, the family, amongst neighbors, in the synagogues, in the community, and certainly between nations, is very hard to achieve and even more difficult to maintain. Rabbi Wen notes that a blessing of a covenant of peace is a rather strange blessing for God to confer to a zealous person. The broken Vav, therefore, meant to convey a message to would-be Pinchases that zealority is not an authentic Jewish way. It may be employed in highly exceptional circumstances, but it is never to be thought of as a normal or acceptable behavior. To make amends, Pinchas must now rechannel his zealous nature and make the extraordinary effort to emulate the behavior of his legendary grandfather Aaron, devoting his days and nights to pursuing and achieving peace as it's continued to be maintenanced. Rabbi Ben David, in the volume Around the Shabbat Table, cites Nachmanides in Deuteronomy 23:10, who underscores the unavoidable damage that this incurred by the person engaging in violence. Even when it is legitimate and warranted, Rabbi Ben Yevi writes, the very zealousness that Pinchas needed in order to act of bravery bears within it the power of coercion and desensitizes his very being, which may ultimately destroy him. One act of violence may make a succeeding act less offensive, resulting in a spiraling and uncontrolling cycle of zealotry. Having unleashed this power of zealousness, will Pinchas now be able to control it, or will his passion eventually consume and overpower him? That is why, suggests Rabbi Ben David, Pinchas is rewarded with the covenant of peace, to assure that his essential nature will not become corrupted, and that his zealousness was truly for the sake of heaven and the purpose of peace. There are many studies confirming that there can never really be a total healing of one who has taken another person's life, whether by accident, with absolutely no negligence, or justifiable in self-defense. Perhaps this is why in ancient Israel there were cities of refuge. Those who accidentally took another person's life resided in these cities together, in a would-be therapeutic environment, learning from each other and hopefully healing one another. The trauma experienced by a moral person who takes the life of another person never entirely vanishes. That is why the Hebrew letter Vav is broken. Rabbi Ben David writes that the broken Vav serves as a reminder that the experience and memory of Pinchas' act will never diminish the peace that he will merit. Pinchas is honored for his valor and unhesitantly responds to the crisis at hand. At the same time, however, there is no glorification of zealousness or acts of violence. It's a crucial lesson that we all must take to heart. There's a popular Jewish saying that goes, when there is no man, be the man. This comes from the Talmud Sanhedrin 81b. This law was forgotten by Moses. In the Midrash teaches us that Moshe forgot this law for Pinchas to remember it. When a public display of immorality is profaning the law of God with a zealous person, a person who is zealous in Hashem's mind rises up and strikes. The general census for Zimri's tribe was, as well as the whole nation, was that Pinchas took the law into his own hands in an act of in a vigilante style and committed murder. That could not be farther from the truth. Pinchas was brought up in the house of Aaron, in the house of Hesed, kindness and love. So to think that he would senselessly take someone's life it's just not there. Pinchas' act of zealousness was love and kindness towards the nation of Israel. This act of zealousness was needed to expunge the blight of immortality brought on by Balak via Balaam. Many who teach this parashah believe that Pinchas committed an act of murder, but in fact, it's the exact opposite of murder. It is Hesed for the nation of Israel because Pinchas avenged Hashem's honor. Some sages teach that the reason Pinchas was given the priesthood was because when Aaron was anointed, it was he and his living sons. Pinchas said that his living sons and all of his future firstborn sons were to be the high priests. Pinchas at that time, he was already born, so he technically didn't qualify for that. So some of the sages teach that he was forgotten in this aspect, and because of his act of zealousness, that is why God gave him the covenant of peace and gave his line the priesthood to be high priest from that moment on. So up to this point in this parashah, peace is not the word that I would use to describe the mass orgy of immorality, the plague that Hashem unleashed upon the nation that killed 24,000 people. And then Pinchas is killing 2 more people. It seems far from peace in my book. But this parashah teaches us that the covenant of peace that Hashem gives Pinchas is for his own protection from the ire of Zimri's kinsmen, as well as the supporters of the entire nation of Israel. Because like I said, they all thought that he committed an act of murder. And shalom, as we know, doesn't just mean, like in English, we have one word that's for hello. We have one word for goodbye. We have one word for peace. In the Hebrew language, the word shalom can mean hello, goodbye, and is also the word for peace. So the shalom is made up of the shin, which equals God, the lamed, which means go forward or join, the vav, which means to become bound, and then the final mem means mighty or to come from chaos. So the word means to become bound and joined together, or to come from chaos in God. And the word shalom, the shin equals 300, the lamed equals 30, the vav equals 6, and the mem equals 40. So the gematria of the word shalom is 376. 3 times 7 times 6 equals 126. And 1 times 2 equals 2. And 2 plus 6 equals 8. And I've said, and teachers, Chris has taught this in the past before, that Hashem created the world in 6 days. He rested on the 7th day. And on that 8th day, he was ready to work with his creation. But we also can look at shalom as 3 plus 7 plus 6, which equals 16. And then 1 plus 6 equals 7, which in Hebrew is the word for completion. There's an important concept in the Hebrew language that helps us to understand the holiness of God. In Hebrew, when you repeat a word, it intensifies the meaning of the word. So if you say shalom, shalom, it does not mean peace, peace. It means perfect peace. And that is my teaching tonight. Shabbat shalom and shalom, shalom.